this a conversation, answer questions. Natalie, did you want to start with anything, or do you want me to get started? I don't mind either way.
Yeah, so I think, and if I'm incorrect at any point, just like jump in, Jamie, but we'll just sort of demo or talk a bit about what we're doing at our own institutions. And if anyone wants to volunteer to do that as well, that would be great. But we're also going to ask some questions probably via the Padlet, since we can't do polls in this team call. So the link that Isabel showed first, I'm just going to add some of the questions that we had there, and then people can put their answers into that. But otherwise, are you okay to start with your demo, Jamie?
Yeah, it's fine.
Yeah, cool.
Of course, I'll just start by saying obviously I'm not an expert, and if there's anything I get wrong, I've got a few questions of my own as well I'm hoping to get to today. So I will start by just sharing screen and just give you a basic overview of how I use it, I guess. So basically, can you see the Power BI, just the standard desktop application now?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I guess getting started, I don't know if everyone here just wants to know about how to use the advanced MIS, or if everyone's using Power BI, because it's kind of two separate conversations. But if you're completely new to Power BI, if chances are you have pretty direct access to the desktop application. If your institution, has all the Microsoft products, you can probably go into the Software Center or the Power BI website and download the desktop application. And that's probably, for anyone who's brand new, that's how I got started. It's the best way to get started. I think you can just sort of play around with the tables and everything, get used to the interface. I would also say, though, if the only advantage to having a pro account, which is what I have now, is it allows you to publish any kind of dashboard or table to the Power BI website. So if you actually want to create something for other people to see, or you want to share it with like your team or something, you need that pro account to just publish. But you can still do a lot within the desktop itself, and you can refresh the data without a pro account, which is pretty good as well. In terms of though, so when I initially got started, I just used like the Talis spreadsheets you can get, the reports you can get from the Talis website. That's how I pretty much figured out how to use Power BI in general. So just as a beginner's task, it's just as simple as clicking there, finding the spreadsheet you've downloaded, and then it'll just sort of download all the tables for you, and you can go from there. If you do already subscribe to Advanced MIS, though, the way I've been going in, and I suspect there might be a few different ways, which I might learn about today, but would be I just go to More, type in Amazon Redshift. Oops, didn't work. I tried this before and it timed out, so I'm just going to basically show you the screen. Talis will provide you with all the details you need. So the database name, the server will probably just be, the database will just be the name of your institution, and the server, there are a number of different options you might get, because some of mine didn't work, so Talis had to give me alternatives. And then from there, you need your own password and username, and then a few screens later, you've actually got your selection of the different I'll just say tables of advanced MIS data that you can upload. So the one thing I'm not doing that I think a lot of institutions probably are is I'm not using SQL to run queries to pull specific data I need. Because I know Natalie will talk more about that. That's what they do at UQ. Basically, I'm just putting all the data I need within the Power BI app itself, and I've pretty much figured out what I need to do from there. So an example would be, so I guess most people would consider Power BI primarily as a visualization tool, which it is, but I use it for that, but I'm also mostly using it just to pull specific data I need, something that could probably be done in Excel as well, but I find the interface more intuitive in Power BI, and I find it just updates a lot quicker. So that's kind of, visuals aren't really my focus, but I have done a little bit. If you're wanting to get started, once you've sort of downloaded the data and you've gone through the Power Query stage, which I'll go back to that later. Basically, all the tables with all the columns or fields that you need will be on the right-hand side. Then it's as simple as just figuring out which particular data you need and then which visual you're after. So it's pretty easy to switch visuals depending on what you're looking at. So this is from a spreadsheet specifically, and I just wanted to get a percentage of how many things we had, how many subjects had a digital status or how many had print items. And I knew I could put a simple pie chart together, but if I wanted to switch that to a bar chart, it's as simple as just changing the visual. They've made it very easy. Of course, some of these, sometimes the data won't present exactly the way you want it to, so you probably need to kind of consider where you're keeping your values. So playing around with the y-axis, the x-axis, if you've ever used, like I use Alma Analytics separately, it's kind of a similar thing to when you're putting together, or graphs and documents, things like that within Excel, just knowing exactly where to put the value. Also, you can use the filter system and you can create slices. So a slice is pretty simple. You just create a separate visual here that is specifically the slicer. Make sure you find the report you want to slice. It's quarterly reporting. Normally it gives you the option to turn that into a drop-down menu. It doesn't seem to want to do that for me right now, but yeah, that's basically how you can all the visuals will filter each other out, and you can use slices and you can sort of interact with them in different ways. I won't go into too many examples because there's sort of endless varieties, but yeah, basically there's a lot of sort of maneuverability within this screen. But that's getting started. That's just learning the basic visual interface. The other things that kind of can help you find the data you're looking for, at least have helped me, would probably be, I reckon there's 3 separate things I use that have sort of helped me piece together exactly what I want. One of those would be Power Query. So if anyone's used Power Query within Excel, it's pretty much the same thing, except you're just applying it to Power BI. So when you get data, you have the option to transform it before you import it directly into the Power BI app. Alternatively, you could just go back into the transform data screen. So from here, you can see these are the same tables that were just sort of represented on the right before. So this is basically a way of this would be the stage where you probably clean your data, where you could change the formatting, you could apply I think it's a delimiter, you can create custom columns, you can do everything you want to get it looking exactly how you want it before it's in the app itself. Ignore these errors. That's a good indication of where you should be cleaning your data, where something's gone wrong. For example, null values might not be displaying correctly, or it might not be able to read semicolons. So that you can usually follow what things are not being reflected in the final imported data through this screen. One thing I use over and over again are these these calculated columns, or conditional columns, sorry. So basically, one thing we do at La Trobe is we like to find every print item within a reading list. So we to do that, I've sort of done this quite simple conditional column. I didn't need to write code, I didn't need to write it out exactly as it is presented up here. I just had to apply this certain logic here. So it's basically saying when there's a digitization request present, when there's a web address present, when there's a DOI present, going down in this sort of descending order, that basically means that we're detecting that has an online section. So it's a digital item for the purposes of this column we're creating. Then it goes down further down the list, and if it doesn't have any of those things, it's print. It's basically just by default print, and we even we're pretty thorough at La Trobe. We put this no ebook library note into everything that we've looked for that we haven't been able to purchase an e-copy. So by putting that note into the data, we can actually designate which of these items is not only print, but actually not even available for purchase. So we're getting really specific here. The only problem with this is this has to come through a spreadsheet and not the advanced MIS. So the advanced MIS doesn't give us enough info for this particular task, so we still have to go that manual option. So basically that's it. So I've created a custom column, conditional column, sorry, ebook availability, and it'll just take every single item, tell you if it's print or digital, and that can make providing those bar charts and those pie charts a little bit easier. Okay. So that's one example of how I think from within the Power BI app, I think Power Query is pretty powerful, pretty useful. The second one would be the DAX, which is I forget what it stands for now, but it basically it's similar to, in my mind, it's similar to running a formula in Excel. If you ever just use the formula function, it's kind of like the Power BI equivalent. It's using a specific language. So you can create one. I haven't used it extensively, but you can create custom measures relating to. So an example here would be I've created custom columns for every reading list going down the page. I've then created a measure that will count how many print items per list and then how many digital. And this is the measure up here. So I get a lot of this information online. I go through like Power BI discussion threads. I try to find someone who's had the exact same issue, so I can kind of just copy and paste and apply it to my own work. And then I've also got a similar measure that will count the amount of distinct item links per list, count the amount of digital, and then tell me what percentage of all those links are actually digital. So that's kind of how we're looking for our overall percentage to find out just how many print items remain on each list. It's sort of like a rough way of we're doing it. So to do that, to create a custom measure for a table, it's as easy as just going to new measure, and then there's just I don't know, like an endless variety of different things you can do. And there's sort of, to my limited experience, I think there's different reasons you'd use Power Query, different reasons you'd use DAX. Keep it in mind that the print and digital column I created previously in the Power Query, that's a permanent field I've added to the data, whereas the DAX is applying a measure, so that will only display based on how I've assembled the visual, if that makes sense. All right, so that's the second thing I use it for. The third, and probably the one I'd be the most careful with, at least I try to be, is relationships between tables. So like this works. I just think there are certain, it can trick you. It can sort of trip you up if you're not careful. So basically, one of the better things you can do is you can combine data sources, which I'll talk a bit more about. And you can create like a connection between not only like the advanced MIS data, like so you can connect the different tables that you get from Talis. We're also connecting course loop tables. So we've got like student not enrollment, but course information that can then be directly matched through Power BI with Talis information. That can include student numbers as well. It can include, sure what else I've got there, but there's a few things. Like if you've got an extra spreadsheet with information that's only available in that spreadsheet and you want to add it to your larger data model, you can do that here, and a relationship between the tables should do it. So that's how they connect. That's how you can visualize it. You can get a better sense of it though. So basically, these are the different tables that are talking to each other, and so once I've established that connection, I can then create like visuals or tables that contain data from both tables. So that makes sense. Thing to watch out for though is the type of relationship it is. So, and this I still don't have my head completely around this. I just sort of, you want to go for a many to one relationship between the tables. It basically just means, to my understanding, that the columns that are matching, so in this case it would be, I think I'm matching the list URL from an all list items report to the advanced MIS URL. So that's where there's the two columns match because it's the same URL. It's many to one. So my understanding of many to one, I'll probably butcher this, but is many means that there's, one means that there are unique values. So in the reading list URL column, it means every single value there is unique and there's no duplication. So you can almost use that column as I think it's called a primary key, where every single row, it can uniquely identify every single row based on the values within that column. Whereas the mini, which is up here, is basically there's duplication. So that same list URL will be present multiple times across going down the column. So the one is the unique value and the mini is the duplication. I might be oversimplifying that, but that's just how I'm interpreting it at the moment. And it can cause problems if it's many to many. They do give you that option, but my experience just from sort of interacting with the data is if you apply a many to many relationship, you can actually eliminate data from your visual. And it sometimes just doesn't work. So I always just, as a rule, I kind of just go for many to one or one to many relationships. Yeah, so that's a way you can sort of link the tables up. It's probably not the only way either. I think you can go into transform data, go back to Power Query. You could probably merge the tables. That's another way. And then there's also you could beat Power BI. You could go to that earlier stage and use SQL to link them together, which I think, Natalie, you'll probably talk to a bit more. All right, so yeah, that's that's the three areas where I think Power BI gets more complex and ways you can sort of manipulate it to get what you want. So some of the ways we use it, before I pass it on, is we basically, as I've shown you, we indicate how many of our items are print versus digital, and then we sort of manipulate that to try to get stats from it. We also recently have been doing student numbers, sort of like statistics relating to clicks. So using the advanced MIS event time series. So I'm fairly new to this, so I'm still getting my head around it. And I find that this is a lot less obvious than the list item, the all list item reports, because you kind of have to dig a lot deeper to see what you're looking at. I know Talis had their recipes on the advanced MIS website. And I think there's some SQL queries you can copy and paste, but because I'm doing it within the app and I'm not sort of at that stage, I kind of just have to assemble it based on the filters. The only thing I'd say is, yeah, it's one of the easiest ways to kind of wrap your head around what you're looking at is just to sort of look closely at the data. For example, just by clicking on event class, you can kind of taking all filters off, you can kind of get an indication of every single entity or value within event class, and that can be like a starting point and go, okay, which of these do we need? Which ones are we interested in? Based on advice from Talis that I had previously in the year, I was able to assemble this one here, which is essentially and I had to use a bit of Power Query to get the information I wanted to be, but basically I could kind of get an indication of how many times, rough indication, how many staff and how many students were accessing reading lists, and you can create this time window as a separate sort of slicer, so you can actually just adjust the time periods you're looking at and determine click information from there. Yeah, and I've sort of just gradually been looking at this closely. You can also, one thing I came up with a couple of weeks ago was we often can't we don't know who's putting library notes in unless they get sent to reviews within Talis. So if an academic isn't aware of the review function, but they put a library note in somehow expecting us to read that, we're just not looking at it. So I found this report that it's not perfect, but it will basically give you an indication of when a library note was created, who created it, and the list it belonged to. So, and then you can, and even in a separate column that will tell you the last time it was reviewed. So the logic is, if it's never been reviewed, we've probably never looked at it. So we go in and take a closer look. And the only problem with it is it doesn't tell you what the library note is, and it doesn't link directly to the item. You actually have to go to the list itself and scroll down to see if you can find the note. But it was an attempted workaround to see if we could catch all those missing library notes, which has been happening for years, I think. Anyway, I think I've been talking long enough, so I'll pass it over to Natalie, unless anyone had any direct questions now, or if something wasn't that clear.
So, Bex from Deakin, just wondering what you're using the percentage of digital versus print. What are you using that stat for?
So over the last couple of years, we've had a sort of like a multi-team wide project at La Trobe where we're trying to, it was originally called P2D, and it's DNF now, and then I think the reading list framework is what it's turned into. But the idea is we're trying to flip as many lists as possible. So we're trying to get all prescribed items on each list digital, and that counts as a flipped list by our sort of logic. So what I'm doing is I'm trying to use those stats to try to get a sense of not only like how many of them have digital and print items on them, but also like how many of those subjects are being taught at 2023 with active students. So I kind of rely on not just the reading list data, I rely on up-to-date course information about which subjects are actually running to get it as exact as possible. I should also mention we've got something called a data flow that's feeding directly into PowerBI, which is coming from our course management system course loop. So when we refresh the data, which we can do up here, which I didn't say before, it's updating the advanced MIS and it's updating the course of data all at once. So we're kind of getting multiple sources, sort of trying to automate it.
So you're using it to target units to have a conversation with the academic about getting moving to an ebook if it's not available in is that the goal?
Yeah, that's been part of it. Initially, it was to see if there's anything that could have been purchased that we missed that just never came through our queues, and we've kind of we got about 10%. We flipped about 10% of all the lists last year just by doing that, and now we're at the stage where the only way we can really change that is to have the conversation with the academics.
Yeah.
Are there any other questions? Or?
I'll just add that the library note report that you've got there is interesting just because I think we've had similar conversations where you could have a bookmark that's very old and been used for a long time, and then someone will add a new note to it and you miss it because there's no report or indication that it's a new note. And in the reviews area, it just seems to flag everything as like new and needing attention. So we don't rely on that. You can't really rely on the alerts and reviews. So we have to do a separate report and then try to figure out if there's been a new note added to the library note field. It's quite complicated to do. So it's really interesting that you managed to do this sort of thing in Power BI. So it's like something that we could look at potentially, but yeah, there's no date in the user interface report that shows you when a note for the library was added. Are you able to get the date from the MIS?
I do, yeah, so I'm still sharing. So basically the time window there will tell you when it happened. And it doesn't just tell you when it's created, it tells you when it's deleted. You don't need to know that, but it tells you when it's been updated too. So when you're halfway through. Just
the note field itself, is that the date related to the note field?
I believe so.
Okay.
Yeah. Again, it's fairly new, and like I said, you actually have to go down the list to find it. So you're not always sure. Like if there's an older library note there, you're not sure which one you're looking at. So that's probably where the flaw is in this one. Unless there's something else I could do to make it easier. It's quite possible.
I like it anyway, but we'll have to look at if we can get something like that set up for us. Yeah.
Sounds like a good segue.
Yeah. I'm not going to go into as much detail as what Jamie did. Jamie did like the very beginning setup. Does anyone have any more questions, by the way? Because
yeah, sorry, before we leave, Jamie, I'm just wanted to clarify your data sources. So you've got the Talis MIS data sources, but then you said you also imported, and you've got your course ones. Did you say you also imported from Excel just the lists, the information from Talis itself?
Yeah. So that was something I was meant to get specific. So basically, anything that can be ordered that we can get from the advanced MIS is preferable, because then we just click refresh and all the visuals.
Yep. But your all lists manual. That means that's an export of all list items from Talis.
Yeah, the only reason we're using that is it lets us identify those print items, because it has those additional columns which aren't currently present in the advanced MIS. So the advanced MIS are all the ones there that just start with like the F dot.
Yeah, and I recognize those from when we did a trial of advanced MIS, and I guess, yeah. So I can see how importing even just the all list users and the other information you got without even advanced MIS could be really pull together some interesting data.
Yeah, definitely. And these ones here are what I just mentioned briefly, course loop data flows, which I'm not entirely sure what a data flow is, but basically I think there are a bunch of tables that were sort of assembled from a BI developer at La Trobe. So instead of having to go into his personal Power BI report, which was what we were doing, he kind of just enabled me to access that data directly. And I think you can import a data flow here as well. Yeah, just there. It's fairly simple.
Does anyone have any more questions? No. Thanks, Jamie. That was really thorough. Like I said before, I'm not going to go into the same depth that Jamie did, because at UQ, we're actually really lucky. We have someone who works primarily with analytics, and so they were able to help us set up our reports for the Talis analytics. And they're actually going to come to the developer community session on Friday that I think Isabel spoke about before, which is this Friday at 8 a.m.
Depending on where you are. Yeah.
I'm like going to say it wrong, but yeah. So we, like, for this conversation, we were thinking of being a little bit more general in the information that we provided. And I'm just going to be general because I'm not an expert at all at using Power BI or analytics, but we thought it might be a good forum in the developer community session to talk a little bit more, or have people there that we're talking more about the nitty-gritty stuff. So if anyone's interested, we'll have our analytics staff member, Nick, to be there to answer anyone's questions or talk a bit more about what we're doing in that regard. But I'm just going to share my screen. I'm just going to sort of show what we used our MIS data for. And like Jamie as well, at La Trobe, at UQ, we use various sources of information as well, like the enrollment data and the course data, like so many different things, but we primarily just use MIS data in these tables. I'm trying to think what else. Yeah, we do a lot of checking with the user interface reports to check the validity of what we've got in here, because it does become quite convoluted. Like Jamie, you were looking at the event series data, I think, and there's reports we have here that sort of show events, which can be like really complex. I think here we've got a report. I've like filtered it right now to semester 2, and you can sort of filter it by faculty levels as well, and schools. They can drill down or drill up. And this is just showing different statuses for lists currently. So I'm just trying to like make sure I'm not saying anything incorrectly. But for example, if I wanted to drill down into like a faculty, I'll go faculty of science, and you can sort of see the percentage of lists that are published versus like the other statuses like published with unpublished changes or draft. And you can drill down specifically into specific schools. So when you can sort of see there, but I'll go back up. And we've got list publisher events. So this one's going to show which staff type actually did the publishing event, which is very useful for us anyway when we're trying to engage certain users with using Talis, like getting academics to publish their own reading lists. And we're trying to like increase our academic engagement with Talis at the moment. And this is a way of using this report to have conversations with schools or individual academics about their engagement with Talis and their actual like publishing of lists. So yeah, you can see at the moment we've still got a lot of library staff publishing. We're doing we're in a weird interim phase where we're transitioning between our course management system in a sense, and until we get into the new system, we are still doing a lot of the work, just like waiting to transition so that we can get more academics on board. So right now, academics are voluntarily engaging with Talis, but hopefully in the future it will be their primary source of information for students for their reading lists or their course materials. So yeah, this is if anyone wants to like stop and ask me a question while I'm showing this, by the way, just jump in. But I'll just drill down a little bit to show, like, for example, this is School of Science. I'm also in between every report here, the filters are also like stuck between what you were doing before, which can be a little bit confusing. So I've just got to remember to like keep checking there. But for semester 2, you can see here we've had 109 academic staff publishing their lists in the School of Mathematics and Physics, or I should say at least 109 Talis lists being published by academics for that school. And we've got a report here for importance. We're still waiting on the change to make importance mandatory for Talis reading list items, because that will really be helpful. In this way, we want to know what academics intend for students to be doing with their resources, so this will be helpful for us. And we just implemented a new one called required and copy needed for it to be clearer for students which items they're expected to be purchasing. So we've got a very small amount of those ones, but it's interesting to have a look at, I think. And again, no, yeah, that's good. Okay. Online versus print, similar to what Jamie was showing before, but we do this in a similar way, but we don't annotate the lists themselves with the sort of project work that you guys were doing at La Trobe. We use a conditional column in Power Query to just have indicators of what would be considered online, and just have that column indicating that something's online, which I think is similar to what Jamie does. But this is semester 2, yep. So looks like we've got the majority of items online, which is great. We've got another, I think this would be considered, if I'm using the terms wrong, just correct me, Isabel, but I think this is like another event table situation. And if I filter that to semester 2, you can sort of see the student engagement with the Talis list. We've got a filter here for the time period, because we do use time periods in our tenancy, whereas at La Trobe, I'm pretty sure you guys don't use time periods, no. But we also do have a date, what do you call this, slider bar, because we will have engagement outside of like teaching periods, for example, which these ones here, these time periods from Talis would represent the time that teaching is occurring, but you'll often have a list that's published before and continues to be published after teaching finishes, and you kind of want to see that information sometimes as well. So we've got 2 filters there, and you can generally see certain periods of the semester. We've also got one here for trying to represent digitization usage as well down the bottom. And we've got an academic engagement table or report as well, similarly set up with very confusing a number of time filters there, which I'm not even sure. I think it's, oh yeah, dates within the semester and then lists within that semester. Yeah. And if just like anyone wants to know what this is what we do, like the bulk work, which is why it looks a little bit weird. But yeah, that's what our reports look like and what we use them for in Power BI. And like the reasons, I guess, like we are using it more for a visualization tool as opposed to like a processing tool, I guess. And we're using them to generate, I think you would say, like conversations with academics and schools, and also sort of to facilitate academic engagement. But yeah, it's probably going to be more and more useful as we go forward. Like I said, transition to a new course. What do you call it? The new like the new system that we're trying to have place for course management at UQ. And yeah, I'm in my role primarily, I'm assisting people that are like building these reports or feeding the data into them. We have a central area where the analytics are stored at UQ. It's called, like, I think it's called Analytics as a Service, Data Analytics as a Service. And the analytics staff, or the people, Nick, I'm just going to refer to Nick, he'll set up this table and pull from what we call like the data lake. And that's where basically a lot of data at UQ is stored, is in the data lakes. We're all pulling, I guess, like data flows from there, like Jamie showed. And Nick will merge different sets of tables and use different coding. I don't think he uses DAX that much, maybe like a little bit, but use Power Query as well, and sort of try to limit the amount of data that we're using so that it's not unwieldy, because this is like large quantities of data. It takes a long time to process. It can take a long time to refresh. And so Nick keeps that in mind too, like the sustainability of these reports, when we can like cut off time periods and like stop pulling new data for those time periods or stop including them in reports, things like that. And I'm basically sort of assisting him in like identifying various like meanings of things, or like doing like quality checking of what's coming through in the reports. Yeah, things like that. So like I said, Nick will be coming to the session on Friday if anyone wants to come and ask more nitty-gritty questions. But I just wanted to keep mine like very general, my presentation sort of thing. But yeah, I'm interested as well if anyone wants to talk about what they do, because we put those questions in the Padlet to see, for example, what are people's different levels of involvement with using their analytics and the tools at their institution, and what sort of tools do they actually use? Because I watched the Google Analytics 4 recording, and that was really interesting, the sort of reports that you can build in there. And it would be like, if anyone's using those sorts of reports, it would be cool to see that as well. I'd be interested to see what reports people have set up there, or if anyone's using anything else like Tableau. I think I spelled that wrong I definitely spelled that wrong in the Padlet, but yeah. Does anyone else want to have a go at showing what's going on?
Thanks, Natalie. Does anyone have any questions or anything they'd like to share? I had a quick question. I think you've sort of already answered this, but so Nick has SQL experience. So if you in the library you decided you wanted to show something different in one of your tables that you haven't covered yet, you would ask him if that can be done, and he'd sort of set that up.
Generally, yeah.
Yeah. Cool.
like I said, it can be very, yeah, I think like we've talked about, I think Nick's talked previously at something in one of the Talis events about how the data is like, that is created in the MIS is like multi-level. It's not like single line relationships. And so it can be a little bit difficult for Power BI to represent that data sometimes. And you have to do a little bit of like thinking about data structures and stuff to get it to represent in a meaningful way and make sense of it. So yeah, it's a bit full on. It does my head in a bit sometimes.
And we should say too that Nick, you know, has questions for consulting team because of those reasons. So you know, if you find yourself, if anyone here finds themselves getting into this, yeah, they should be able to help at least answer some of those questions around the data.
Yeah, and the developer sessions with when Tim's there, or like, you know, Isabel's there as well every time, 8 a.m.
Not contributing, but yeah.
And it's good to have conversations with them. And sometimes, yeah, we get people like from our institution to come and ask Tim directly, and it's good having that like one-on-one conversation time. Yeah, ask difficult stuff. Yeah.
Unfortunately, Tim's on leave
No,
this week, so he won't be here there on Friday, but Rich is there.
that's good. Rich is nice. But yeah, so just looking at the Padlet responses.
I was just going to jump in because just to tell people that what you two have shown today is like it's been a lot of work to get to that point, but it's okay to, at the very start when Jamie and I, mainly Jamie was setting it up, just start with like one data source from advanced MIS and just play with that. There is really good documentation. It's like a dictionary. Is that what you call it, Isabel? Within, I think I did send a link.
But the recipes page, I think in particular, you know, you could put those in, and because there are all these examples of things you might want to report on. Thanks for putting the link in. I was just looking.
That's right.
For that.
Yeah.
So that might be a good place to start.
Definitely. That's what Jamie and I just analysed that page, and we kept having to refer to it to look at, okay, what data do we want to start with? And I think we just started like with one, I think the list and the items, and just were sort of playing with that, and then it grew from there. So I just want to make sure that looking at these reports, it might look a bit scary, but that's, yeah, it took a while to get there. And just to start small would be my recommendation, and just experiment. And you can't break anything, you know, with it. That data that is coming in, you just sort of play and experiment with that.
That's a really good point.
So I was going to say, one thing you can do as well is if you're using, like I kind of do use Power BI to replicate something you might have previously done in spreadsheets to streamline it, you can sort of just do both. Do the spreadsheet thing on one screen, do Power BI on the other, and just see if you get to the exact same result. It's usually a good indication that you're doing it right. One really easy way to do that, to make sure what you're looking at is up to date, is do a count of the item links that come through the advanced MIS, and then see if that's the same amount of items that exist on the reading list page. So if they're matching, you can that's a reliable indication the data's up to date and it's working properly. Like checks and balances kind of thing.
So we also do a report at Deakin. We get quite frequently asked by publishers what textbooks are being used. I'm not sure if other universities' acquisitions department get that question, but we do. So we were constantly pulling off all list items reports and then filtering it to publisher. So we've set up a dashboard that our acquisitions team can quickly just go to and then pull the report from there. It's also very interesting to see where older editions are still present on reading lists. It's quite, interesting to see what they're doing in terms of trying to spread the load of limited concurrent user ebooks.
Yeah. Can I ask, like, why do publishers ask what of their textbooks are being, you don't know, but you give them the data free? They're like, here.
Our acquisitions team have apparently always done it. So yeah, I queried it and I was told we do that. Just prescribe textbooks to get an idea of demand.
They want to know. We've had the occasional case where some publishers have trawled through publicly available Talis reading lists and contacted customers to say, oh, you know, we have this book, you know, do you want to buy it from us, sort of thing. So if they do want to know that stuff.
Elsevier is a problem, for example.
Hi, I have a quick question. That all looks amazing what you're doing, and it does look like quite a bit of work has gone into it. So I want to know, other than the things that Jamie's mentioned, what future adjustments to services are you going to do based on the reports and information you're gathering?
I'm happy to jump in and answer that. Jamie did touch on the no ebook one, so we do look at those to see, you know, if it isn't available in e, you know, we need to have a conversation with the academic, or, you know, and definitely OERs are, you know, where we try and have a conversation and steer the academic in down that road, but that's obviously a very difficult conversation. But that's one thing. Definitely those, we call them what do we call them? The unfit for purpose, I think, is some of the licenses which Bex, you sort of were touching on, just some that the licenses are so restrictive that we need to have conversations with academics as well. So yeah, with the reporting, we haven't, if anyone's got any ideas around that, because it would be good to be able to tag different resources in different ways, but that's something, yeah, we would definitely be interested to see how other unis are dealing with that.
So we add a library note, a standard library note for limited concurrent user ebooks. Actually, no, a student note to tell the students, not a library note. So yeah, please note this is a limited concurrent user ebook. Or if it's got read online only, we pop that as a library note. Or if it's very restrictive download, all of those sorts of things, we've got standard notes so that we can run a report and clearly identify what those ones are. It's getting more and more difficult because the variety of limitations of DRM is just getting so terrible. There's going to have to be a point in time where we are not going to be purchasing stuff just because it's, yeah, as you said, not fit for purpose. It's ridiculous.
If an academic has bookmarked it, are you doing a report every week to put that note in?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, right. Yeah, that's time consuming. We do use library notes for a lot of other things, but there's, yeah, for everyone to remember to put when to put a note in for certain things can also get a little bit messy. I think that's the only, yeah.
We don't have that much activity on reading lists on a weekly basis, so it's not that much effort. Once you've, yeah, just look at what's being added between a certain date range, and then limit it to books and chapters. It's really a manageable.
It's not too bad, yeah, because we'd have a similar number of lists to Deakin. Oh, okay, that's great. Thank you. Thanks, Bex.
I just saw Rodney's comment in the chat that has anyone tried to incorporate any data related to students, for example, attendance or academic results, and correlate this with the engagement with reading list material? I think that's like next level.
Yeah,
that would be ideal.
Yeah, I know it's sort of been mentioned, but I think, yeah, nobody's really taken that step yet. Okay.
I know some other unis have done it in a different reading list system and did encounter quite a few difficulties trying to get all the data sources talking to each other. So I imagine it's quite difficult.
Yeah, I remember seeing a presentation, I think from someone in New South Wales a couple of years ago about that did a lot of work with correlating those things. And it was really, really interesting, but I'm not sure if I can remember where the recording is, but I think it was like University of
Newcastle, maybe.
Was it Newcastle?
Possibly.
I think maybe
Yeah.
Wollongong has done something in
I
the
think
past.
Wollongong too. I was thinking
Wollongong.
Wollongong as well. That was pretty full on. But yeah, there are a lot of like privacy issues in getting permissions to do things like that. It can be quite difficult.
Yeah, there would be. It's interesting, Ella's comment that Latrobe tried this about 5 years ago. If anyone does go down that route, do keep us posted on how it goes. We're almost at the hour. Does anyone have any other questions? No, about anything not related to Advanced Muse or Power BI as well? I might just stop the recording.